Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we're on episode 276, and we thought we'd talk a little bit about extreme heat, especially while you're out there in the woods. Now, it's fair to say over here in Nova Scotia, we're getting another heat wave. This is the second at the start of this year already, and apparently you're getting some heat over there too, are you, Ben?
Yeah, we coming back where I was out Sunday. We hit 37 degrees. The air conditioning in the SUV was not really cutting it. It was blowing cool air, but it wasn't cooling the rest of the air fast enough. So it was cooler in the car, but not cold by any means. And when you got outside, it was like going in an oven. It was mainly drier. And so there was challenges for that. And I'm sure you're dealing with similar issues. Those extreme heats and humidities can make for some challenging environments. In fact, I would argue more challenging for me than cold.
Oh, for me, I would agree with that 100%. I notice, I find it harder to breathe in the hot, really hot, than really cold. You know what I mean? Here on this side, as I'm sure you're aware, you're from here, you know this, all ours is humidity. It hit 30 degrees today Celsius, but then with the Humidex, we're back up to 42. You know what I mean? Yeah. But that's all humidity heat, which if anybody out there has not appreciated a humid heat, I envy you. It is a completely different type of heat. 37 degrees as a mediocre, not a mediocre heat, I don't want to say dry heat because it's never 100% dry, but less moist, like a relative humidity around 50% and under. It's really not that bad. You can still sweat. You can, your body actively cools itself. It's still hot as hell, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from it. But it's a different type of heat than even 37 degrees with 10 degrees of humidity. So like a 27 degree with a 37 degree humidity, that's rough. That's 80% humidity out there. You can't sweat anymore. It feels like you're suffocating. Doesn't matter if you put a fan on you. It's just blowing more humid air onto you. It literally exhausts you just to exist in those conditions, which is kind of what brought this topic up, because there is two different extremes to extreme heat. There's extreme hot but yet dry, and extreme hot and humid, and there is some certain limitations and considerations that go into both of those things, which is why we both thought it would be a good, compelling topic for tonight.
Yeah. So the one thing I've often said to people is you can dress for the heat or the cold, you can't dress for the heat. And by that I mean there's only so much clothes you can take off before you get arrested for indecent exposure. The other thing is, as the sun is generally a lot brighter at that time, the risks of burns and other issues increase. So keeping the sun off your skin is also somewhat important for various reasons. So we'll have to get into some of those things. But yeah, like I said, if I'm going out minus 40 and someone tells me I'm going, I got some canoe suits, I'll put on some long johns, I'll put on extra warm socks. Good, I have boots that are rated to well below minus 40. I have methods, I have ways to survive this. In the cold or the heat, I have a different issue, right? You're sweating, you're having trouble breathing, everything you wear is uncomfortable. Things chafe quicker because you're wet and sweating. So heat rashes. You lose energy. After a certain temperature, your body just doesn't want to do much. It's just telling you, you need to find a cool place to lie down and let me recover. So I think that's a part of it. Now, before I go ahead, I'll let you speak.
Nope, I was going to say, you're kind of jumping right into everything, and I think it's a great plan that we got going here. So why don't we start at the beginning, and let's talk about the actual elemental considerations going into this. So aside from just the heat, a lot of times when it's extra hot, and what I'm thinking here is you generally get a lot more UV. It's a lot more intense sun. You're going to have to cover up a little more. There's going to be some sunscreen. If, tying into last week's episode, if you have your pets, there's an additional consideration on there, because if it's hot for you, you get your little furry friend that's wearing a fur coat. Man, they're sucking air pretty hard, not doing much.
Yeah, we used to take Molly. She would head for water right away. Molly and Molson both would dig holes in the ground and lay on the damper soil because that was a little bit cooler. These are definitely methods that work. Shade, get out of the sun. Very first thing I'm going to suggest, if you're in this, the shaded areas, an area with a slight breeze are much more comfortable than out in the open. And if you can find larger bodies of water, they're usually moderating. It won't be as hot there as it would be somewhere else. You don't want to be in the middle of a big field on the hottest day. You want to be somewhere where there's a good flow of water, because that's generally going to help with that issue. So definitely look for that.
Sorry, I was just answering
Clothing.
some comments here.
Yeah, no, for sure. Uh, Definitely try to wear lighter colored clothing, and clothing that breathes really well, allows the air to get in and out. You don't want to trap anything in that. Um, and if you can, this is my favorite trick, is anything you can, make it wet. Like, honestly, if you have a handkerchief, soak it in water, put it over your neck, put it over your head. That evaporation is going to cool down. It's going to pull some of that heat from your body, and it's going to allow you to dissipate the heat, because the human body needs to dissipate heat. We're warm-blooded. We produce heat, and if the outside environment is warmer than us, we can't dissipate. So now we're having trouble. We have to deal with that. So any way you can to bleed some of that heat off and get yourself more comfortable is important. But you can go sit in the water and cool down, especially moving water. I find it a lot better. So small streams, rivers, things like that, really helpful.
And an important piece of information before I skip by, because I know she'll flog me otherwise, is Melissa did give me some information here on the UV index and stuff like that. So before I forget about it, I'm going to jump into that because it's onto this. And she was actually doing the research here for like the preschools, daycares, and educational systems here in Nova Scotia. This is the government's recommendations, and this is just going to be some stats that we throw out there. I'll see if I can get a link to this as Mel, wherever Mel got it figured out there. I think it just came from Environment and Climate Change Canada. So somewhere on there. So UV index, just UV index alone, and UV index is basically the intensity of the radiation coming from the sun and hitting your skin. Generally, you can check your UV index. It's going to be on one of your weather channels. There's apps that you can get for your watches and phones and stuff like that that'll tell you the daily UV and stuff like that too. And it is worth keeping an eye on it, especially if you take a lot of time outside. So low UV index, 0 to 2. It's minimal sun protection required for normal activity. Wear sunglasses on a bright day, more to protect your eyes so you don't put any additional strain on them. If you're outside for more than an hour, cover up using sunscreen, minimal FPS, things like that. Reflection off snow can nearly double UV strength. Wear sunglasses and apply sunscreen. Funny enough, I wear my sunglasses significantly more in the wintertime than I do in the summertime, specifically for that reason, because we do get a lot of glare off the snow, especially if we had a little precipitation and it freezes to that ice. Everything out here turns to basically one giant mirror. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Ben.
Yes.
So we're stepping it up now. We get to 3 to 5, moderate UV. Take precautions. Cover up, wear a hat, sunglasses, and sunscreen, especially if you will be outside for 30 minutes or more. Look for shade near midday when the sun is its strongest. Now we bump up to high. That's a UV index of 6 to 7, and honestly, that is not uncommon to hit anymore here in Canada. Once upon a time, a high UV index was not super common. We did get it, but not a lot. Moderate was more our average going there. But now high, that's pretty common. So what's it say on that? Protection required. UV damage and skin can cause sunburn. Reduce time in the sun between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m., obviously when the sun's the hottest. And take full precautions. Seek shade, cover up, wear a hat, sunglasses, and sunscreen. After that, we get very high, and we do hit some very high days here as well, which, once again, 20 years ago, I don't remember hitting very high UVs. Maybe I didn't pay attention as much when I was in my 20s. I can't remember, but I don't remember it being in the news almost every other day. Regardless, 8 to 10 UV index. Extra precautions required. Unprotected skin will be damaged and can burn quickly. Avoid the sun between 11 a.m. 3 p.m. Take full precautions. Seek shade. Cover up. Wear a hat, sunglasses, and sunscreen. So a little bit of urgency coming into that now. And finally, we have extreme, which is 11 plus, and believe it or not, that is getting more and more common here in Eastern Canada too. I'm sure BC probably has fairly extreme days over there as well, because you guys tend to get, even though everybody says it rains over there for whatever reason, you and I have talked about this, per capita we get way more on the East Coast. You guys tend to get a fair amount of sun, as well as you got hilly areas there, so the higher in elevation you're probably going to get a little clearer days and get up there in the UV. And this is what I found interesting. So extreme UV 11 plus. Take full precautions. Unprotected skin will be damaged and can burn in minutes. We're not talking like an hour out there, folks. We're talking minutes. Avoid the sun between 11 and 3 p.m. Cover up, wear a hat, sunglasses, sunscreen. White sand and other bright surfaces reflect UV and increase UV exposure. So those of you that go out to the beach on extreme days, you are basically sitting yourself in a reflective oven. Values of 11 or more are very rare in Canada. However, the UV index can reach 14 or more in the tropics and southern US. And we had a recent extreme UV day, and that's what I mean. We're seeing that now here in not only Atlantic Canada, across the country. So it is a thing. And our brethren and sisters to the south, it's probably not uncommon for those sunny states at all to hit some extreme UVs.
I just checked the forecast for the places I expect to be in the next couple of days, and generally it's at high 7. But
I mean, still, we're talking at high index. I mean, they're recommending that you're using some pretty high FPS, like FPS 30 or plus.
Yeah. Some people might know a bit more than this. I heard that the SPF number actually is related to the number of minutes you can be in the sun.
I have no idea. All I know is, as a fella that sunburns walking by the oven when we're cooking pizzas, I usually use FPS 60 or above. Now, I have heard that FPS 60, anything above that, you're basically wasting money. And I have no idea if it's any truth or not. A dermatologist once told me anything from FPS 60 to FPS 100, it's such a minimal gain that it's not even worth the money. I don't know if it's true. You folks do your own research. I know it's not uncommon for me and my daughter to grab FPS 100. You know what I mean? We both burn super easy.
I think for people with fair skin like ourselves, it's definitely something to consider. Also, like, I have the blue eyes. I don't know if that matters as much as I think it does, but I am fully believing that my blue eyes cause me to get headaches and have more issues with the sun. I can't see in bright sunlight. Like, I literally cannot. And I always have sunglasses with me in bright sunlight, winter or summer. There's one in each of my vehicles. There's usually a pair everywhere I go. And it doesn't have to be expensive ones, but I need to protect myself from that light. So, yeah, I mean, that's a whole different topic, though, really, I guess. But.
Well, I mean, that kind of does come into the extreme heat. As the sun intensity increases, people that don't normally wear sunglasses, guess what? They're pulling them out more. If I'm going into the woods and I know it's going to be hot, sunny, and high UV, I'm packing at least 2 pair of sunglasses. Much like yourself, I have a difficult time seeing in high bright conditions. And I'm not taking the chance that I lose or break one set and be left without, because that will ruin my camping trip or my outing or my whatever.
You mentioned the snow, but water does the exact same thing. If you're out on a lake, if you're on a canoe, if you're swimming, especially if you're wading a lot, you will burn in quicker, like twice as quick, if not more, because of the sun that's bouncing off the water and hitting you, plus you're getting double dosed, 100%. So keep that in mind. Yeah.
And I mean, just some general stuff to keep your skin covered. I'm reading some of the things on the side notes here, the cleft notes to protect your skin. And a lot of it is pretty standard stuff, so I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence. It's things like, be in shady areas, don't be in the sun at its hottest, cover up as much skin as you can. Once again, all good stuff. And that is the thing. Covering up your skin. That's a tactic I use quite regularly because, once again, even the FPS 100 doesn't seem to stop me from burning. So I've actually invested into UV shirts. Generally, I don't go out in the woods in shorts. Even in the hottest day, I'll try and just wear a lighter pair of pants. I like the additional protection against bugs and brambles and thorns and all that crap. And I don't like the look of me in a pair of shorts with a set of hiking boots on. It's not much for the imagination. Nobody needs to see that. But anyway, I generally always wear pants, and I've gotten into getting long-sleeve UV shirts, and they are incredibly thin. They're generally a Gore-Texy material. They're going to pull and wick moisture away from you, and I truthfully don't find myself a whole lot hotter in the long-sleeve t-shirt than I do in, say, a t-shirt like this, like a cotton t-shirt. Cotton's generally a thicker material. It holds a little bit more heat. Yes, my arms are open, but they're just getting sunburnt anyway. So between a covering UV shirt, a pair of pants, and my wide-brim hat, which everybody has seen me wearing photos and stuff like that, they know what I mean, that generally gives me a ton of UV protection. And I work on weekends in parking lots. I've told everybody out there before, I'm a motorcycle instructor. We stand on parking lots 16 hours on the weekends. And sometimes there is intense sun and we're sitting in black asphalt absorbing all this heat. I might have told the story before, but I can't remember. Once upon a time in Stellarton, just after our parking lot was recently asphalted, somebody measured the temperature 3 feet off the ground. It was in the 50s. 50 degrees Celsius. I can't do the math in my head right now for Fahrenheit, but that's over 100 for sure.
So, I mean, that's, yeah. So those extreme heats. So,
131 Fahrenheit.
That's not human. That's not. That's where you can start cooking things.
Yeah, like that is hot AF. Anyway, long story short, it is not impossible to hit those temperatures, and when you get intense sun, it's soaking into the area around you. So you definitely got to be aware of it. It's not just a glance at your phone or your maps or whatever and be like, oh, it's going to be a hot weekend. Great for camping. Well, maybe, but how hot is hot? You know what I mean? Hot for me is basically anything over 25. When you start getting up into those ridiculous numbers, now it's uncomfortably hot.
Yeah, and I hear people say, "Oh, I love it when it's hot. I love 34. I go out and I bathe in the sun." Good for you. Not me. And so here's the other thing: in that heat, you cannot put out the same physical effort you would not in that heat. So, in these hot days, you want to do your travel in the morning and in the evening, usually around sun up and sun down. In the hottest hours of the day, you want to find yourself some shade, set up a shelter, keep out of the direct sun, and do your best to cool yourself down. As Robert is demonstrating right there, stay hydrated. Water is good. Water with some electrolytes is much better. So
I have tea. I'm drinking a cup of tea with a bottle of cold water.
but you can buy electrolyte supplements or like Gatorades or the Powerades or all these other things. They have electrolytes added. As you sweat, you're sweating out both water but also salts. And
Keep chatting.
I know
Right
people
back.
are worried about salts. Oh, my sodium intake's too high in the summer and the heat. You do want to not run out of salts or your electrolytes because if you do, you will literally stop functioning and you can
Each?
fail in other ways.
All right, so electrolyte supplements. These are what I've gotten into. And these just get added to bottles of water. And this is BioSteel. I'm no way, shape, or form married to the company. It just happened to be I was going through Costco and these were on sale. But they're just one of these little hydration pouches. And I carry these in my bag and stuff like that. And you can add this to even a bottle of water is what it's generally for. But if you filter some water out of the stream or something like that, you can throw this in. This is going to replenish a lot of those electrolytes and stuff like that, as Ben was saying, I think. That you lose as you sweat. Because that's the thing. You can pound back just plain water, but if you're sweating a ton, you're losing a lot of electrolytes. And those electrolytes basically is what causes your neurons. And I'm not a doctor nor a scientist, so if I'm wrong, have some mercy, internet. But basically, that's the transmitters for your body to do work.
Yeah. So if you lose your electrolytes, your cells can no longer talk to each other, and you will start to shut down. You will glitch out, as it were, and it's not a good thing. And there's I think we've talked about this before. There was somebody in one of the Olympics, I think long distance runner. They were drinking distilled water because it's the cleanest water, it's the best, and they made it to the end of the race, but then they passed out, and I do not think they recovered. And it was determined that they had lost all the electrolytes from their body, or enough to cause their body to fail to make it. So yeah, keeping those electrolytes up is important when you're sweating and working hard. So keep that in mind. I also used to when I was search and rescue, it was a tube, and they were like pills. They were like Tum style pills, and you dropped I think 2 in a cup of water. It was a fair amount of electrolytes, but it was meant to help you recover. And I mean, it will give you back your energy. It takes a few seconds to absorb, don't get me wrong. It's not instantaneous, but it makes the difference. So my recommendation, and I'm strongly recommending this, is, stay hydrated, use electrolyte water, use water that has that extra stuff. Keep
Mineral
out of the
water.
direct sunlight.
Just so we're clear, mineral water a lot of times is going to have, or mineralized treated water, whatever, it's going to have a lot of other things in it that, pure distilled water or whatever's not going to have in it. This will replenish a lot more electrolytes than if you're just drinking straight up distilled water, and even some just spring waters. So mineral water generally has a little bit more stuff in it. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ben, but just before we moved on, it seemed like it fit in there.
Yeah, so those are sort of the things to do. Like I said, dress for the weather. If the sun's going to be beating down your UV shirts, don't wear tight clothing. You want loose clothing, stuff that can allow some flow. One of the other things is you can wet your clothing and put it back on, and that will immediately give you relief. Um,
Depending on the humidity, that can be a blessing and a curse,
yeah,
which is what we're
well,
going to run into here. But before we jump down that rabbit hole, a quick mention on covering up. Sometimes more is better. Wearing the long sleeve shirts and stuff like that, yeah, it doesn't give you as much air ventilation around your body, but especially when you get into that intense heat and that intense sun, that radiation coming down on you is doing more damage than the residual heat. Thus why, like when you used to watch a lot of movies in Egypt and, other places, deserts and things like that, they're wearing longer flowing clothes so the air can get through it, but they're getting a lot more sun protection as well. You know what I mean?
yeah. And I mentioned earlier, lighter color clothing. You don't want to go out in black clothing. That'll heat up quicker. So, whites, beiges, anything that's going to kind of reflect a lot of that light away from your body. Yeah, I think we've really covered the subject, though.
Yeah, so jumping down that next rabbit hole, because yeah, I think we kind of covered up that one. No pun intended. But happily accepted. Yeah, the whole wetting yourself down. Yeah, it is a great strategy, keeping in mind this could be a double-edged sword depending on the humidity out there. A lot of times I've wet myself down and thinking, yo, this instantaneous relief is great, but then the humidity is so high, that water's got nowhere to go and it becomes another layer of insulation, or if nothing else, just an annoyance. Imagine somebody throwing lukewarm water on you and then trying to work in the woods, and it will not evaporate off. You are still just as wet an hour later as when you first applied that water, minus whatever has, physically fallen off by gravity, because nothing's really evaporating. And like I said, you got to weigh that depending on how hot you are getting. And I guess we can briefly talk about like heat stroke, heat cramp, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. And once again, folks, we are not doctors. We're going to give you some rough information. I highly suggest you do some research and learn some of this on your own. But keep an eye out for some signs of things that are going very wrong. If you start getting a lot of muscle cramps, heat cramping, and things like that, well, you're in the first stages of literally heat exhaustion. That's where your muscles cramps and stuff like that. It just gets, your muscles are sore. Maybe they don't want to open as far. You will know what I mean when you feel it. That's the only way I can say it. Once you get past that, you may start getting into where you're getting a headache. You're getting thirsty, you're very red, you're sweating profusely. You may even have a little trouble with breathing or feeling like you're getting full breaths of oxygen. Once you move past that, that's when you're like beet red, but you're not sweating. If you ever hit that, and that is a very key indicator, like you are hot as blazes, but there is no sweat coming out, you're basically encroaching on an emergency stage there. Like you got to get yourself out of the sun, get yourself cooled down, and get some fluids into you. And at that stage, don't just take a bottle of water like this and slam it back, because I can almost guarantee you that's going to come straight back up. You got to introduce it in slow little sips and let your body try and absorb some of that in. Otherwise, your body is just going to attack it all at once. It's not going to go well, and it's going to come straight back up the way it went down, basically at the same temperature and consistency. And it is very uncomfortable. I have never had heat stroke, but I have been in the far end of heat exhaustion to where I was almost done sweating, and it is horrendous. And it's not like, oh, I got a couple hours of coolness, I'm good to go now. Once you hit heat exhaustion, you are a couple days recovering from that crap. Even once you cool down, you still don't feel good, your body hurts, and your head pounds. Not a fun time.
Your body has an optimal temperature it should be held at, and if you exceed that by a few degrees, it takes some time to recover. If you go into hyper or hypo thermic event, it takes a while for your body to recover. So it's important to stay alert of that. And as you see the early signs, deal with them then. The last thing you want is to suffer from those. The other one that we didn't mention, but like heat rashes. So if you're starting to overheat, your skin will get blisters and get sore. And that's uncomfortable too. So yeah, just keep an eye out on those things and deal with them as soon as possible. Don't power through it, because that's not the solution. As soon as you can do something about it, do something about it. And it doesn't take a lot to deal with it early on, but it takes a lot more if you wait a little bit long.
And that's the thing. When you're talking extreme weather, and once again, extreme heat, extreme cold, these aren't minor inconveniences anymore. You are toying with things that could potentially end your life. Heat exhaustion kills tons of people yearly. Just look at the stats. It's one of the leading causes of death in North America. Weather related, heat exhaustion or freezing. And I mean, that's, there is major other things out there. I'm not trying to rank it up there, but it's like disease, poisoning, weather, disease is going to encompass all your things that fatally kill you, because I'm sure there's lots of diseases out there that kill more people. But anyway, I'm not trying to belittle any of that in any way, shape, or form. I'm just saying it's a real thing. There's a ton of people that are like, oh yeah, it's a hot day, but I just got to get this done. Prime example. It's a hot day, and this is a real example. It's a hot day. It's a humidex of 45 degrees Celsius, which once again is putting you into that like at least 120 Fahrenheit. And I was working for somebody, and they're like, I know it's a hot day, guys, but we got to get the culvert in today. And we're all looking at each other going, like, that's inhuman. You can't expect us to go dig a culvert out by hand in this kind of heat. But sure enough, we went out, and people started getting heat cramps, and we even had people get into heat exhaustion. There was a whole big investigation on it. It was a miserable thing. But this is the mentality that happens. Oh, it just has to be done. It's either financially based or time based or whatever the case may be. How much is your life worth? You know what I mean? Like, I don't belittle anybody for attempting carefully. But don't just bullhead your way through it, like Ben was saying there. Don't just grit your teeth and have it out. That is definitely going to end bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess quick recap. 26 minutes. Yes, we can still get out and we can do some stuff in extreme heat. We just got to take it into consideration. Is it humid? If it's going to be humid, well, now you're not going to evaporate sweat so much, so you're definitely going to have to slow things down. You're going to notice you're going to get a lot tired a lot faster. If it's not humid, then you may have a little leeway, especially if there's a breeze or something like that. But keep in mind, you're still going to sweat. You're still going to have to cover up a little bit from the sun, because generally when it's warmer and drier, you have more intense UV and it's hotter. And I'm saying generally because you can get high UV with high humidity. I'm not saying you can't, but generally. So you're going to have to cover up more, be it with clothing or UV protection, so you're not getting the blisters and sunburns and stuff like that, which can just very much inconvenience you. Have you ever had a real bad sunburn from walking into a campsite? I know I have. It makes the rest of the weekend pretty miserable. Not, I wish I didn't come kind of miserable, but way more miserable than if I had not been sunburned to the color of a lobster. Make sure you do pack that sunscreen. If you're taking your pets, allow for them. You may have to move slower. You're going to have to take way more hydration breaks. Make sure you have a game plan for water whenever it's warm. Not extreme heat, even when it's warm. You'd be surprised how much you drink in warmer weather. And then, watch for signs that things are going bad. Danny over here is talking about having a headache the last couple days, and I mean that's another sign of, intense heat. Headaches are one of the big first things you get. Is you generally a headache, you're getting some muscle cramps and things like that. Start keeping an eye on these things. If you're getting a bad headache and it just doesn't seem like it's going away, and you're starting to pound back water real fast, it may be time to take a break, get in the shade, get your body cooled down. I have seen it hot enough that I've crawled into a river with my clothes on just to try and get my body temperature down quickly, because I knew things were going bad fast. I think that's what I want to review. Did I leave anything out there, Ben?
No, I think you hit most of it on that. I'm same as you. In extreme heat, I'm going to try and get into the water. I'm going to lay down. Even if you can get your feet in there, if you can get your hands in there, if you can get cold bottle of water or like a cold pack, place it in your armpits or your groin area or even along your neck. These are all areas that really can get to your bloodstream pretty quickly and cool your blood, and it helps circulate your body. Other than that, no. I mean, just, be very aware of it and then do the things to avoid it. Like I said, work not in the hottest points of the day. Make sure you stay hydrated. Cover up your skin so you don't get burned. And keep an eye on your buddy. You will often notice your buddy's in trouble before he knows he's in trouble. So look out for each other. I think those are the big things.
Yeah, 100%. And we're coming right up on the half hour, so that worked out pretty well. I guess a quick note for next week. Ben and I were talking about this prior to this episode. It's looking like next week's episode may be on Thursday, not Wednesday, for anybody that really matters to them. Simply because, for the first time, I think, quite a while. We both have obligations on a Wednesday night that's going to leave us both without internet. So it's not that we don't want to do it. We just don't physically have the ability to do it. So I'm going to bump it over to Thursday night. Ben may not have internet then, but I know for sure I will. So something will come out. We'll come up with something interesting and fun.
Yeah. And if we don't, if you didn't, this would be the second time we missed the show, I think.
Maybe. I don't think we've ever missed a show. We decided not to do a show once, and then we moved the date a couple times, but we've never actually missed a week, have we?
I thought there was. There's 1 week we both couldn't do it, and it was like 2 years in.
Maybe. I'd have to go back and check the dates now, but in any case, that's the plan for next week. Thanks for joining us here tonight, folks. Just a quick note on these shorter episodes. They do seem to be doing better algorithm-wise, but longevity, let's see what happens. I'm not far enough into this yet that I'm willing to commit 100% to these shorter episodes, but the algorithm information is reflecting on it. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Very good. Get out there, have fun, stay safe, keep an eye on each other.
Night, folks.